Hey, welcome back. It's time for another episode of Revenue Optimization Radio. So let's get roaring. With Patrick Morrissey, CMO of Altify, the sales transformation company, sponsor of the show today. Let's bring him in and get launched. Hey, welcome, Patrick.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Okay. You know, I suddenly realized that the acronym is ROAR. I like that. We're going to roar ahead to this morning here.
Well, exactly. And we're going to do it with somebody who's in the expert class of sales leadership. Excited to welcome and get into a conversation with Andrew Buckley, who's the Chief Revenue Officer of Traction on Demand. And one of the reasons I'm excited about this is because Andrew has seen the film, over the last couple decades in small and large ways, scaling both as the VP of Inside Sales at Crystal Decisions, and he went on to hold similar titles at Business Objects and SAP. But over about the last 8 years, he has built the foundation of what's become, I think, the fastest growing company in technology services with Traction on Demand. Andrew, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Patrick. How are you?
I am doing great. How about you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
So I am a longtime follower, friend and admirer of Traction on Demand. But for those who are not familiar, give us the snapshot on Traction on Demand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Traction's about a 600-person company. Its core business is actually Salesforce consulting. And we kind of work throughout North America doing that. We also have been able to use that layer of doing work to actually incubate product ideas, and we've also been spinning out some companies in that process as well. So kind of multifaceted business, but yes, very kind of fast-growing consulting company, and I've been here for about 8 years when there was about 8 of us, so it's kind of gone through 9 or 10 iterations of evolving through that process, so it's super fun for us so far.
Yeah, and you hit on something interesting that I want to come back to a little bit downstream in the conversation, because you're scaling both a services business as well as now you're scaling product businesses. And that is a level of complexity that I think a lot of people have not seen the film on before. They've done one or the other, not both. But when I come back to the start here, the reality is Salesforce is doing great. Just had fantastic earnings announcements, raised their guidance. They are doing gangbusters, and you guys are the biggest standalone integration and services partner in the Salesforce ecosystem, which to me means that you've got to scale like Salesforce scales, which means you've got to hire sales reps like Salesforce does it. What do you think? What's your approach, and how do you think about the problem of hiring, and what's the strategy?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're right. Salesforce has created a ton of opportunity. So as they're growing 26 to 30% a year, the service business is actually growing faster than that, probably 30% faster, just because of the complexity of what they're doing. So there's a big push for us in our hiring. So we have to be able to kind of get people that can support everything that Salesforce is doing, but then do it in a way that supports more on the consulting side. So, our hiring is probably the core of everything we do. I know there's lots of books about, good to great, get the right people on the bus, but the core business and how Traction was kind of evolved really was a bunch of people that wanted to live in Vancouver and wanted to build a company up here, but who were actually old software guys that got into the consulting business. Are not so old, I guess, in Greg's case. Our CEO was about 30 at the time. But as we've kind of gone through that, we're looking for something very different, I think, in our hiring process. We're really looking for actually a different mindset. So almost this idea of someone that sees their business as an owner, a kind of a builder, very kind of humble, and to a certain degree kind of beat to a different drum. So traditionally sales has been very much like, have success, we'll pay you really well, but we may not care too much about what you're doing as long as you're just driving results. We actually very much went the opposite and said it's all about the core person, and the good things will happen if we do great results. So we took a couple of things a little differently. So originally the original sales guys didn't even have a comp plan. They were just on the same bonus structure as the rest of the business, which was quite different. But it changed very much the way we approached it. And then our hiring process specifically around that is, it's a little tough. We interview 51 people per hire. So we're pretty discreet in how we do it. We have a very defined profile for the different roles we have. But the interview process it goes something, HR will kind of vet the candidate first. Then you'll meet with the sales managers. We'll do a traditional kind of sales process in the interview process.
Sure.
And then we kind of shift gears. And where we kind of take things a little different is we send all the candidates home with basically a demo world that they've come into where they actually have to build their own Salesforce org, build a business case, pretend their traction, and sell to us as if they're traction. So it gives them typically 15 to 20 hours working and thinking about how it would be like to sell our technology. The reality is 50% of them don't show up. It's a great way for us to vet people out. And if that goes well, and that they do great in the demo, then we move them to culture where they'll sit with 3 of the future peers. And if any of those peers puts a thumb down, they won't move ahead. So it's a very gated process, but once you're in, obviously we kind of put a lot of energy into developing. So we spend a lot of time on that upfront process, making sure we have the right people on the bus.
That's very interesting for a couple different reasons to me. One is that, certainly I think to scale anything, but certainly to scale sales and then to, scale a sales organization, you've got to have a structured process. But you're looking for a mix of skills in terms of sales acuity. Certainly they've got to have some demo acuity selling in the Salesforce ecosystem, and they've got to do a little bit of homework. But instead of some sort of manufactured 30, 60, 90 plan, you're asking them to come back and think about and sell to you directly. And then there's a whole different element of this, which is all about values, which goes back to the point that you raised at the top. And how do you think about, screening those candidates around, the values mindset? Because I can see scenarios where I've been a big performer, a top performer. I expect to be, well paid. I'm pretty clever technically, and, maybe I'm a little bit young. So I may ace the first couple parts of this, interview and fall on my face when I get to the values. How do you think about, that in the screening process?
Yeah, I think to a large degree, we don't actually just only hire people in tech. So we've definitely taken some flyers and people from different industries that have proven to be very effective for us. So it's much more on the mindset of how innovative, how smart they are. So we're typically hiring culture as being probably the core foundation, and then skills and will on top of that. So it's a little bit different than how we kind of shifted. I think often people will interview based on people's past performance. And I think that's part of it, but I'm more looking for people, have they grown in any role they've been in? Have they been an overachiever in any role they've been in? Have they been impactful? Not just on pure, hey, I did 130% of my number last year, I'm a rock star, you should hire me. So we kind of lean more to, can we build versus buy? Can we get the right raw materials in there? And then to put the energy in to build these people into being successful reps with us, which I think has been very effective for us so far.
It seems like it. So when you're looking at somebody's CV or resumes, or you get into the interview process and you're having a conversation, what's the filter you're using in terms of the characteristics or the skills and traits that you're looking for, or what you see across your team? What in your mind makes a great sales rep?
For us, actually, it's a little different. I think it's super great skills of kind of listening, being able to be empathetic, because a lot of our customers are going through a massive transformation. So being able to do that, people that can deal with conflict. We have very much a multi-sales process where we're dealing with the customer. We're also dealing with Salesforce because they're also a co-customer in that, and then our own internal delivery. So somebody that can collaborate and work through all those key issues. People that can deal with obstacles and objections and failures to a large degree and are able to bounce back, because there's lots of those in this kind of world. And then I just think people that can be innovative and think outside of the box and really kind of evolve our offerings to market that maybe not be the same as everybody else, but how do we show up smart and innovative, but come at it differently, but in a way that really helps the customer move ahead. So we're looking for really kind of 5 core attributes through the interview process.
And is there one of those attributes that you think is more important than the others of the top 5 you just listed?
I think it's a combination of all. They kind of have to be pretty well balanced for us. There's no one area you can kind of lean on and get away with. But I would say overall, just really strong collaborative communication skills moving people forward is probably the number one.
Well, and that leads me to the related question, because you and I were talking about this before the program. You very much have a build versus buy approach to hiring. And I'm going to guess that also directly informs how you think about, sales managers and sales leaders. So how does that skills mix change in terms of, what are you looking for, or what are the traits you expect your sales management to exhibit?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the things we're looking for in our salespeople is kind of a similar mentality often when we're doing that initial hiring. I'm often thinking about future leadership, I believe. So of our organization now, actually, we have 11 people in leadership roles on the sales team. 10 of them have come through our own business. Only one was an external hire. It's mainly because we can get anyone from Vancouver to move to Toronto. People in Canada will understand that joke, but all that being said, it is one of those things where we definitely like that. And so we're looking for those people that are humble builders, kind of beat slightly to a different drum, and are really more interested in the collective benefit of doing the right thing at a high level that will create great things for them, but also for their team. So we really want people that put their people first and spend the energy and time to make their people great. So way more focused working down than up in our company, working with our people more hands-on from that perspective. So it's kind of a lot of the things we're looking for when we lead, and we've developed a whole bunch of structure to kind of make these people successful.
Curious what that structure looks like, because it's very interesting to me that you have such a high mix. And it's not particularly surprising based on what little I know of Traction on Demand, but the fact that you've got 11 internal people you've grown into leadership positions versus one from the outside tells me everything I need to know about the approach and the philosophy. But then the other reality that, I'm sure you've seen this film dozens and dozens of times, is the things that might have made me a great rep. Whether it's my acuity on a deal, it's going deep with the customer, it's really understanding the problems and navigating some of the other relationship things, and just a dogged approach doesn't necessarily serve me when I become a sales leader. So how do you pick up the best parts of the sales IQ and the people IQ that you were talking about, and actually scale them from a management or a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I think it's something we've been confronted a lot in the last probably 5-6 months, because we have so many people moving into leadership as we kind of continue to expand at a fast rate. So we've developed a kind of a 16-week program for the leaders, everything from developing their leadership style to how to recruit, how to have what we call real talk, like EQ conversations, dealing with account strategies, tying to Altify. So there's a whole kind of process where we work with the leaders going through on a kind of a weekly basis that we're going through that. So we're spending a lot of time developing all those components for them to kind of express that process. But it really, at the core of it, is, trying to round them out. But I think where we've been lucky, we've really had kind of that core raw material to work with based on how we've hired getting people in the front door at the start. So I said most of our people already have very much leadership personality types, and then we're just trying to develop all the skills around that with them. And then just the way the team works together is very collective.
Yeah, well, and you also, I think the focus that you have on culture, because you mentioned that at the top of the bucket in terms of what your priorities were for hiring at a sales level, which is going to translate to sales leadership. But you also use the phrase humble builder. And I think that's an interesting construct when you think about a sales leader's role in terms of coaching and enabling her people. That there's a difference between I'm going to deliver a number and how we generally think about it is I'm a great manager versus if the frame I'm taking is I'm a humble builder and I'm applying that to trying to build skills and traits and results across my team, then that would seem to indicate that you get some of the outcomes that may help explain why you guys are scaling so fast.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it. I would say that way of thinking, or that mentality, it all speaks to, I know I've talked to Altify before. I think you guys have a similar philosophy of getting people in that, people want to work with. And I think that's part of it, is people that are humble and want to learn, because there's so much learning in what we do. And then also want to help other people learn is kind of the core foundation, I think, for every one of the leaders we have. If they don't have that, they can't really lead, at least here. That kind of trumps everything else.
Yeah, and I want to hold that thought for a second, Andrew. Sure. We'll take a quick pause to pay the bills, but we're speaking with Andrew Buckley, who's the CRO of Traction on Demand, and talking about sales leadership and how do you scale your sales team. So let's pay the bills and we'll come right back.
You're only as successful as your customers, and that demands the need for an exceptional sales execution, revenue retention, and customer success. The challenge for most sales leaders and their teams, however, is that their sales process just doesn't match how their customers buy. Sustained growth isn't possible because the revenue team isn't aligned with customers and prospects. With Altify's sales transformation solutions, companies can deliver predictable revenue growth. Yes, we said predictable revenue growth. They can also acquire and retain customers, and they can collaborate across the revenue team to qualify and win new business while delivering value that unlocks cross-sell and upsell opportunities. Built natively on the Salesforce platform, Altify helps salespeople, managers, and executives achieve sustained revenue growth. They help accelerate sales performance for Autodesk, Comcast, GE, Honeywell, Salesforce, Tableau, and United Healthcare. They can do the same for you. Visit Altify.com, just like it sounds, Altify, Altify.com. And now back to Patrick and his guest.
Thanks, Paul. We're talking today with Andrew Buckley, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Traction on Demand. He's running a global business, but headquartered in Vancouver in beautiful British Columbia. And when we left off, Andrew, you were talking about the focus and the intentional approach that you take in terms of cultivating sales leaders and having really a focus on learning and developing. And I think that goes back to one of the core differentiations of Traction, but also the core of what seems to have made your team successful is hiring great people and then growing them. And you mentioned a second ago that you've developed a 16-week program to help round out the skill set of sales managers that talks about everything from leadership to account planning to hiring, training, recruiting. Is that something that has been a long-standing practice, or how did you develop that program?
No, I wouldn't say it's been long-standing. I think it's been over the last several months almost taking all the learnings and having to sit back from, I think, what I found successful for me and other people, and just taking the time to actually build it out in a very logical way that our team can kind of evolve to. And one of the things, in leadership is we're a big believer that everybody doesn't have to do it the same way. So for some people, they're very comfortable in the not knowing and just kind of going with the flow. And then for other people, they need a lot of structure. So we want to be able to meet both of those needs, which is kind of give some people some structure that maybe they weren't thinking about, and then for people that really need that kind of level of structure to be successful, also supporting that as well. So to be honest, it's been a lot of learnings over the years, a lot of scars, and how we may be able to take some of that learning and put it into more of a program for our new leaders and the sales side.
That's very interesting, and I think my suspicion would be that's one of the factors that will help you scale to the next level, because you guys are growing like crazy. And when I think about growth, again, comes back to the answer to most problems comes down to let's hire more sales reps. Think about the profile of sales reps. I'm curious about how you think about it at Traction, because at Altify, we've done some research with our CRO benchmark study for 2019. And what we found is that with all other factors, being equal, one clear way to optimize revenue performance is make it the women's problem, because women outperform men, statistically 7 to 10%, even if you take out a lot of other factors. And I'm curious what the experience you have and how you think about, in this case, gender, but diversity more holistically across your team at Traction.
It's been super interesting. I saw that in the CRO report you guys put together, but yeah, it absolutely aligns with what we've seen. So some of our top reps last year were females on our team. And I think one of the things that we've seen is how do we create environments. So over 40% of our team is now female.
Oh, wow.
And growing. Yeah, and growing. And I think what we've seen, and I've been in software a long time, is that this was traditionally, for lack of a better word, more of a male-dominated vocation. And what we're finding is the women are really doing exceptionally well, in many ways outperforming their male counterparts. So how do we continue to create an environment that is a little bit different, appeals a little differently, and also plays to some of those strengths that sometimes we feel are that are more prominent female than male, without getting into too many stereotypes. So there's definitely things we see that some of the women generally are bringing to the table, not exclusively on either side of that, but some of those things that have really helped us for sure.
What would be some of those traits? And again, I take your caution about not trying to stereotype it, but from your chair, looking across your team and having, as you mentioned, the women being top performers there, what are some of the traits that they exhibit that get into what does great selling look like? Yeah, so,
broad strokes, knowing there's outliers on every side, but I think generally better listeners than men. So generally, I struggle with this myself. I want to solve. I hear and want to solve, and I think generally women are more comfortable listening and going deeper into the relationships and really trying to understand the more what's going on and why those things. I think that's more natural that we've seen. Based on my wife, better planners, better multitaskers, and often I think they collaborate better. Again, kind of a broad brush to paint everyone, but we see a lot of that, particularly in our world where we're in the consulting world. Those skills actually are kind of core to being success in a role, and I think partly why we're seeing and so excited to bring more women in, not just into the sales team, but into the sales leadership team, because they're definitely bringing a different perspective that I think is rounding out our offering to the market.
100% agree with you. And when you think about broader coaching beyond just the setting gender aside for a second, and what advice would you give to other sales leaders that you think is critically important in terms of enabling the right kind of hiring and continue to scale at the rapid clip that you guys are doing across both the software business and now in addition to the core services business?
Yeah, I think it's so one of the leaders that we kind of grew our first kind of leader in, this guy Lucas Francis, who's taken over running our whole services organization. A lot of things that he's been bringing forth is really a defined program around, we've got like a 15-step expert path from when people come in all the way through. So having a very defined program where people know where they are, what skills they have to work on, what KPIs we're looking at, so they can self-guide themselves. So I think that's really important on that side. And then similarly, we have a similar one for the managers as they go through the people path. And a lot of that comes around to coaching and hiring and enabling, accelerating. So it's pulling all those things together in kind of a structure that really allows people to kind of self-pace themselves through the process and actually put it largely back on the individual for their own growth, where the leader becomes more of an enabler versus pushing people through that process. So it's a little bit, I would say, some of the things I would definitely pass on to other people. And then I think it is important that you have systems like Salesforce, like Altify, that give you that kind of infrastructure technically to take some of these concepts and put them into action in a way that people can really use day to day.
That's great advice, Andrew. And we're speaking today with Andrew Buckley, the CRO of Traction on Demand, and talking about scaling sales and sales leadership. And I come back to the approach that you mentioned earlier, Andrew, about this being all about the people, and that really from a hire and from a train and from a build perspective, doubling down on the answer you just gave, that this is all about culture and skills and will. And when you think about who shaped your sales career and what's enabled your success as a sales leader, give me an example of somebody who's a great sales or revenue leader that you've worked with that imparted some wisdom to you. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, it's probably not the standard answer I think most people would have. So I worked for some great executives when I was at Crystal, when I was a VP there. But I actually think the person that had the most impact was the guy I worked for when I was 13 years of age in a grocery store in Dublin. His name was Ronnie Muddyman, and he had just that unique ability to understand people at their core. And just, I was making a whopping 60p an hour, which is about $1 an hour. But the valuable life lessons he got of showing if you really cared for people, how much they would tend to care back for you and what you were trying to achieve. And yeah, it was just an interesting, he was, all these years going back, he was probably the one that had the most impact in how I view doing what we do. Because I think some of the things we've done have been a little contrary to traditionally what we've seen in the software world. And I think a lot of that was all about the people and creating an environment where people can be successful and develop and really contribute. And I think most people want to do that. And it's more about how you create an environment where that can be successful. So it might be a contrary answer to most, but that's where I definitely had the most impact for me.
That's great. And obviously that lesson stuck because you've built a tremendous business at Traction on Demand. And I really appreciate your insights and your approach, both with regard to hiring sales as well as, sales leadership. So if listeners are interested in reaching out to you or learning more about either connecting with you or Traction on Demand, or they're thinking about what's my next great, sales career, how do I take it to the next step, and I want to work at Traction, where should they go for more information?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't have that prepared. Probably, do I dare give my own email out in this call? I think if you go to our careers page on our Traction website, tractionondemand.com, that's probably the best place to start. And then you can reference my name, and definitely can come through that way as well. So, but no, I've really pleasure speaking with you, Pat. And I said it's been great working with the Altify technology and methodology over the last several months as well. So really appreciate everything you guys have been doing as a partner for us.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your perspective on people and leadership. So I know you've got a business to run. We'll let you get back to it. Have a fantastic day, and thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Pat. Take care.
And that's a wrap. Thanks, Paul.